The Interstellar Defense Academy, floating in the sterile vacuum around Kepler-7, represented the pinnacle of galactic cooperation, or at least that was what the promotional materials claimed. In reality, it was a pressure cooker of competing species, inflated egos, and the kind of institutional bureaucracy that could make a Vogon weep with envy. The station itself was a marvel of engineering, a rotating torus that generated artificial gravity through the ancient and reliable method of spinning really fast. Inside its pristine corridors, cadets from 47 different species learned the art of not killing each other, which was ironic considering they were training to become military officers. The academy operated on a carefully structured system that everyone pretended was merit-based but actually reflected the galactic pecking order with uncomfortable accuracy. At the top were the Krellians, 7-foot-tall reptilian humanoids with bone-plated skulls and enough natural weaponry to make a tank jealous. Below them came the Thoraxians, insectoid beings whose hive mind light allowed for terrifyingly efficient coordination. Then the Avarians, mammalian pack hunters with reflexes that bordered on precognitive. The list continued downward through decreasing levels of impressive physical capabilities until you reached the bottom tier, species from Class 3 and 4 worlds, where the most dangerous predator was something that could be defeated with a stern look and a rolled-up newspaper. This hierarchy was never officially acknowledged, of course. The Academy's charter explicitly forbade discrimination based on planetary origin. In practice, everyone knew where they stood, and the cafeteria seating arrangements reflected this knowledge with depressing consistency. Strong worlders sat near the viewing ports, weak worlders huddled near the kitchen, and everyone maintained their invisible boundaries with religious devotion. The planetary classification system that governed this social order was itself a masterpiece of scientific categorization. Class 1 worlds were garden paradises, where evolution had apparently taken a vacation. Class 5 worlds had actual predators, the kind with teeth and instincts. Class 7 worlds were where things got interesting. Planets where survival required constant vigilance, and prey species evolved into something considerably less prey-like. Class 10 worlds were theoretical, the kind of nightmare planets that shouldn't exist according to most models of how life actually worked. Worlds where everything wanted to kill you, including the plants, the weather, and probably the air itself. Most species came from Class 4 through 7 worlds. This was the sweet spot of galactic civilization. Dangerous enough to breed intelligence and cooperation, but not so lethal that you spent all your evolutionary energy just trying to survive until lunchtime. The Academy's student body reflected this distribution, with the occasional Class 8 cadet showing up to prove their species could compete with the big boys. Class 9 and 10 worlders were more myth than reality, the kind of thing people joked about when they wanted to tell scary stories. Yeah, right. A planet where the gravity alone would crush most species, with predators that hunted in packs and venom that could drop a Krellian in seconds, and an environment so hostile that the dominant species evolved psychological trauma as a survival mechanism. Sure thing, buddy. Except, as it turned out, Class 10 worlds were not theoretical. Earth had recently been surveyed, classified, and processed through the appropriate bureaucratic channels. The classification team had submitted their report, gotten drunk for 3 days straight, submitted an amended report, and then requested trauma counseling. The planet checked every box on the Nightmare World list and then added a few new categories just to be thorough. Gravity nearly double galactic standard. Check. Atmospheric oxygen levels that would cause cellular damage to most species. Check. Apex predators in nearly every biome. Check. Weather patterns that included lightning storms, tornadoes, hurricanes, and something called a derecho that was apparently just wind moving so fast it could tear buildings apart. Check, check, check. And the dominant species, humanity, had looked at this planetary hellscape and decided to not just survive but thrive. They had domesticated the wolves that hunted them. They had turned the auroch, a creature that could gore a Krellian with ease, into docile cattle. They had looked at the ocean, full of creatures that could swallow them whole, and decided to sail across it in wooden boxes. They had found the spiciest plants on their world, things that evolved capsaicin as a defense mechanism to cause pain in mammals, and decided those plants would make food taste better. They were, by any reasonable metric, completely insane. The Galactic Council had reviewed Earth's application for admission with the kind of careful consideration usually reserved for defusing antimatter bombs. On one hand, humanity had achieved faster-than-light travel and seemed generally peaceful if you ignored large chunks of their history. On the other hand, they were from a Class 10 Deathworld and had the physical capabilities to match. After 6 months of debate, numerous subcommittee meetings, and one memorable incident where a human delegate had accidentally broken a door by pushing it too hard, the Council had approved Earth's admission with the following stipulation. Humans were banned from direct military service until the proper integration protocols could be established. The Academy, however, operated under a grandfather clause in its charter that predated the Council's decision. Any species admitted to the galactic community had the right to send cadets for officer training. The administration had tried to weasel out of it, but the law was clear, and 3 weeks ago, the first human cadet had arrived at Kepler-7. His name was Marcus Chen, though most of the station just called him the human, in the same tone one might use for the bomb or the biohazard. He was, by human standards, completely average. 5'10", medium build, dark hair kept in the short style that seemed to be a human military tradition. By galactic standards, he was a walking nightmare wrapped in friendly packaging. His bone density was obscene. His muscle fibers were wound so tight that medical scanners initially mistook them for synthetic augmentation, and his reaction time was fast enough to make Ivarians nervous. None of this was apparent from looking at him. Marcus moved with a casual looseness that suggested he had never encountered danger in his life. He smiled easily, made terrible jokes about the cafeteria food, and generally acted like someone who belonged in a Class 4 paradise world rather than a planet that had actively tried to kill his species for hundreds of thousands of years. This disconnect between his appearance and reality was deeply unsettling to anyone who had actually read his file. The Krellian cadets found his presence particularly offensive. They had held the top spot in the Academy's informal hierarchy for generations, and they were not about to surrender it to some smooth-skinned primate who probably could not even crack a thoraxian shell plate with his bare hands. Never mind that the preliminary medical data suggested a human could probably crack a thoraxian shell plate with their bare hands, if sufficiently motivated. Never mind that every combat instructor who had reviewed human anatomy had done so with the kind of pale fascination usually reserved for discovering a new species of nightmare fuel. Never mind any of that. The Krellians had a reputation to maintain. Vexthor was the undisputed champion of this particular brand of Krellian arrogance. He stood 7 feet 2 inches of scaled muscle and bad attitude, with a bone-plated crest that he had filed into decorative points because apparently he had not been intimidating enough naturally. He was the top of his combat class, the pride of his instructor, and he had personally sent 4 cadets to the medical bay over the past year through training accidents that were definitely not accidents. The Academy administration had done nothing about this because Vexthor came from an important family, and also because the cadets he had hospitalized had been from weak worlder species that everyone agreed probably should not have been at a military academy in the first place. Vexthor had taken one look at Marcus on his first day and decided the human needed to learn his place. This was going to be entertaining. The Academy cafeteria was a study in controlled chaos during the evening meal period. Species segregated themselves by approximate dietary requirements, with the obligate carnivores eyeing the herbivores with the kind of ancestral hunger that millions of years of civilization had not quite managed to erase. The humans had been classified as omnivores, which was technically correct but failed to capture the sheer range of things they could apparently digest. Marcus had looked at the cafeteria options on his first day, declared everything looked great, and proceeded to eat a meal that would have caused intestinal distress in 3 different species. He had then asked if there was hot sauce. 3 weeks into his tenure at the Academy, Marcus had established a routine. He sat at a small table near the middle of the cafeteria, not trying to claim territory in the power zones but not relegated to the weak worlder ghetto either. He ate whatever the kitchen offered, made small talk with anyone who would tolerate his presence, and generally acted like being surrounded by species that could theoretically dismember him was just another day at the office. Some of the other cadets had started to relax around him. He was weird, sure, but he seemed harmless enough. This was precisely the kind of thing that made Vexthor's blood boil. The human was not showing proper deference. He was not acknowledging the natural order. He was sitting there eating Nutri-Paste with the kind of contentment that suggested he actually enjoyed it, and that was just insulting to everyone's intelligence. Vexthor made his decision during the evening meal on a completely unremarkable Tuesday. He was going to put the human in his place, publicly, and establish once and for all that Class 10 worlder or not, this was a Krellian station. He stood from his table with deliberate slowness, his claws clicking against the metal floor as he crossed the cafeteria. Conversations died in his wake as cadets recognized the body language of someone looking for trouble. Marcus was halfway through something that might have been synthetic chicken when Vexthor's shadow fell across his table. He looked up with the kind of friendly curiosity that was either extremely brave or extremely stupid. "Hey Vex, need something?" The informal greeting was a calculated insult. Krellian protocol demanded the use of full names and appropriate honorifics. Vexthor's crest flushed a deeper red. "You are in my spot, human." Marcus glanced around the cafeteria with exaggerated confusion. "Huh, I don't see your name on it. Also, you have a spot over there, where you were literally just sitting. You misunderstand. This entire section is Krellian territory. You should eat with your own kind." "My own kind? There's one human on this entire station, man. Unless you want me to eat in a closet, I'm pretty much stuck with you guys." A few nearby cadets made sounds that might have been suppressed laughter. Vexthor's tail, thick as a human thigh and studded with bone protrusions, twitched with irritation. "Then perhaps you should request a transfer. Weak worlders often find the academy too challenging." Marcus set down his fork with the careful precision of someone who was actively choosing not to be offended. "Look, I'm just trying to eat my dinner. Can we maybe not do the whole dominance display thing? I've had a long day, and I really don't want to fill out an incident report." "Incident report?" Vexthor leaned forward, placing both clawed hands on the table. The metal groaned under the pressure. "What incident would you be reporting, human? That a superior species asked you to relocate. Superior is kind of subjective, don't you think?" Marcus's tone remained conversational, but something in his posture had shifted. He was still relaxed, still smiling, but cadets with combat training recognized the change. He had moved from casual to ready without seeming to move at all. "There is nothing subjective about it. The Krellian people have dominated our region of space for 3,000 years. We are warriors. We are predators. You are a primate from a world we had never heard of until last year. Know your place. My place is at this table, eating this meal, minding my own business. And for the record, Earth has only been in contact with you guys for 14 months, so yeah, of course you had not heard of us. That's how first contact works." Vexthor's hand shot out faster than most species could track, gripping the edge of Marcus's tray. With a casual flick of his wrist, he sent the entire meal flying across the cafeteria. Nutri-Paste splattered against a far wall with an anticlimactic splat. The cafeteria had gone completely silent. This was the moment where the human was supposed to back down, apologize, or maybe take a swing that Vexthor could easily dodge before hospitalizing him. Those were the 3 acceptable responses to a dominance display. Marcus stood slowly, brushing paste residue off his uniform. He was 5 inches shorter than Vexthor and probably weighed 40 pounds less. When he spoke, his voice was very calm and very quiet. "That was my dinner. I was enjoying that dinner. You threw my dinner across the room for literally no reason except to make yourself feel important. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to apologize, you're going to get me a new tray, and we're going to pretend this never happened. Or we can take this to the mats in the training hall and settle it properly. Your choice." Vexthor laughed, a deep rumbling sound that showed all of his very impressive teeth. "You challenge me? You actually challenge me to combat? I'm giving you an out, man. Take it. No. No, I think I will educate you right here. Vex Thor's hand blurred forward in a strike that would have caved in a Thoraxian's chest plate. Marcus was not there anymore. He had moved to the side with economical precision, and Vex Thor's clawed fist punched through empty air where the human's head had been a fraction of a second earlier. Before the Krellian could recover, before he could even process what had happened, Marcus had stepped inside his guard and struck once. It was not a fancy move. Human martial arts had been developed over thousands of years on a planet where losing a fight meant death, and they had been refined by every culture independently arriving at the same basic conclusions about how to break another person's body as efficiently as possible. Marcus drove his palm up into Vex Thor's jaw with every pound of force his earth-forged muscles could generate. The strike carried roughly 1,100 pounds of pressure concentrated into an area the size of a credit chip. The sound was remarkable. It was a wet crunch mixed with a snap, the distinctive audio signature of bone giving up and going home. Vex Thor's head rocked back, his jaw dislocated, his facial bones spider webbing with fractures, his nose converted from cartilage and bone into abstract art. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings, his considerable mass hitting the cafeteria floor with a thud that made cadets 3 tables away flinch. Marcus stood over him, breathing slightly harder, his hand already swelling from the impact. He looked around at the shocked faces surrounding him with an expression of genuine confusion. I warned him. You all heard me warn him, right? Nobody answered. A Thoraxian cadet made a chittering sound that might have been agreement or terror. A Weaverian had pressed himself against the far wall, his pack-hunting instincts screaming that he was in the presence of an apex predator. Security arrived 90 seconds later, summoned by an automated alarm that triggered whenever someone hit the floor that hard. They found Marcus sitting calmly at his table, Vex Thor unconscious and bleeding, and an entire cafeteria of witnesses who could not quite articulate what they had just seen. The security team leader, a Thoraxian named Clix, who had 17 years of experience breaking up cadet fights, assessed the situation with professional efficiency. Someone want to tell me what happened? 47 voices tried to explain at once. The general consensus was that Vex Thor had started it, the human had ended it, and reality had briefly broken in between. Marcus raised his hand like he was in class. I'm going to need medical attention for my hand. Also, he's going to need a lot more medical attention for his face. I didn't mean to hit him that hard. I was really trying to hold back. Clix looked at Marcus's swelling hand, then at Vex Thor's ruined face, then back at Marcus. You were holding back. Yeah, I pulled it at the last second when I realized how committed I was to the strike. Is he going to be okay? Medical teams arrived with stretchers and scanning equipment. The initial assessment of Vex Thor's injuries took 3 minutes and got progressively worse with each passing second. Fractured jaw in 4 places, shattered nasal bone, 3 broken teeth, severe concussion, possible skull fracture, and soft tissue damage that suggested someone had hit him with a kinetic weapon rather than a bare hand. The medic treating Marcus's hand, a small mammalian species called the Priscians who had evolved from creatures very much like Earth's rabbits, worked with shaking paws. Your metacarpals are intact. Swelling indicates microfractures but nothing serious. How is your hand not broken? That much force should have shattered your bones. Human bones are pretty dense. We're built for this kind of thing. Built for what? Destroying people's faces? Well, not exclusively. But yeah, kind of. Earth was not a nice place to grow up as a species. We had to get good at violence or go extinct. We chose violence. The medic finished wrapping Marcus's hand in silence, then helped load Vex Thor onto the stretcher. The Krellian was still unconscious, which was probably a mercy given what his face looked like. The medical bay of Kepler-7 station was a monument to galactic medical science, equipped to handle the physiology of every species in the Academy, and staffed by professionals who had seen everything from training accidents to exotic diseases. The surgical team assigned to Vex Thor's case gathered in the prep room with the kind of weary professionalism that came from years of stitching up cadets who thought they were invincible. Dr. Renlix, the chief surgeon and a thoraxian whose species had pioneered synthetic tissue regeneration, reviewed the scans with compound eyes that could see into the infrared spectrum. Next to him stood Dr. Yira, a Wyverian whose small, precise claws were perfect for microsurgery, and Dr. Holst, one of the handful of human medical professionals who had been approved for off-world service. Holst had arrived at the station 2 months ago and had been studiously ignored by most of the staff, who were not sure how to interact with someone who could theoretically snap their spines, but also held a medical degree. "All right?" Renlix clicked, his mandibles expressing resignation. "Let us review what we are dealing with. Maxillary fractures in a complex pattern, zygomatic arch completely shattered, mandibular body fractured in 4 distinct locations, 3 dental avulsions, severe soft tissue damage to the lips and surrounding structures, and a concussion that borders on traumatic brain injury. The force required to cause this much damage would be considerable." Yira's ears flicked nervously. The human struck him once. One time. How is one strike capable of this? Holst, who had been reviewing the data on his tablet, looked up with an expression that was equal parts professional concern and grim amusement. "May I?" "Please," Renlix gestured, with a chitinous appendage. "I suspect you have insights we lack." "Right. So, humans. Let me give you the quick rundown on human anatomy, as it pertains to punching people in the face, which is something we have gotten unfortunately good at over our evolutionary history." Holst pulled up a holographic display of human skeletal structure. "First thing you need to understand is bone density. Human bones, especially in the hands and arms, are roughly 40% denser than galactic average. We're from a high-gravity world, and our skeletons had to adapt or we would have collapsed under our own weight." 40%? Yira's voice was faint. "Yira's. That is significant. Oh, we're just getting started." Second factor, muscle fiber composition. Humans have a much higher percentage of fast-twitch muscle fibers than most species. These are the fibers responsible for explosive movements, like sprinting, or relevant to our current situation, punching. When a human throws a proper strike, they are engaging muscles from the legs, hips, core, shoulders, and arms in a kinetic chain that transfers force with brutal efficiency. Holst zoomed in on the hand structure. Third factor, and this is where it gets interesting, humans have evolved specifically for striking. Our thumbs are opposable and reinforced. Our knuckles are padded with extra connective tissue. The bones of our hand, the metacarpals, are designed to distribute impact force. We are, and I cannot stress this enough, naturally weaponized primates. Renlix made a clicking sound that was the thoraxian equivalent of a nervous laugh. "And this is considered normal for your species." "Completely normal. Every human culture independently developed striking-based combat systems. Boxing, karate, Muay Thai, Krav Maga. The list goes on. We have been perfecting the art of punching each other for at least 10,000 years of recorded history, probably longer. And before you ask, yes, humans regularly punch each other recreationally. We have entire sports built around it. We pay money to watch other humans punch each other. It is honestly kind of weird when you think about it. So this cadet, Marcus Chen, he has trained in these combat systems. According to his file, he has a second-degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and 4 years of boxing training, which means he has probably thrown tens of thousands of punches over his lifetime, all while gradually conditioning his hands to withstand impact force. What he did to vex Thor was not luck or a fluke. That was a technically proficient strike delivered with appropriate force. Yira's tail was tucked completely under her body now, the mammalian equivalent of abject terror. Appropriate force? Look at the damage. Here's the thing. Holst's expression became very serious. Based on the biomechanical analysis, Marcus was pulling his punch. The angle of impact, the follow-through, the distribution of force across the fracture pattern, all of it indicates that he reduced power at the last moment. If he had committed fully to that strike, with proper hip rotation and weight transfer, we would be dealing with a fatality instead of a surgery. The room was very quiet for a moment as the implications sank in. Renlix finally broke the silence with a question that had been bothering him. since the patient arrived. Dr. Holst, your species is from a Class 10 world. I have reviewed the classification data. I understand intellectually that Earth is dangerous. But please, help me understand what it means practically. What does it mean to evolve on a Deathworld? Holst set down his tablet and leaned against the surgical prep table. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone, explaining something he had thought about extensively. Imagine you are a small primate, maybe 3 feet tall, living in the African savanna 2 million years ago. You are surrounded by things that want to eat you, big cats that can run 60 miles per hour, hyenas that hunt in packs and can crush bone with their jaws, crocodiles that can drag you into the water and drown you, snakes with venom that shuts down your nervous system in minutes, and that is just the predators. The herbivores can kill you too. Hippos are territorial and aggressive. Elephants can stomp you flat. Cape buffalo will gore you for looking at them wrong. He pulled up an image of Earth's ecosystem. Then there is the environment. Temperatures that swing from freezing to scorching. Storms that can level entire forests. Droughts that last years. Diseases that jump from species to species. Parasites that eat you from the inside. Your own food can poison you if you are not careful. The water can kill you. The air in some regions can kill you. Everything, and I mean everything, is actively trying to end your existence. So you develop tools. You develop social structures. You develop communication and cooperation, because a lone human is a dead human. But you also develop the physical capacity for violence, because sometimes tools are not enough. Sometimes you need to fight, and you need to win, or your genetic line ends right there. Evolution on Earth was not a gentle process. It was brutal and unforgiving, and the species that survived were the ones that could adapt, improvise, and overcome. We learned to outthink our predators, outlast our prey, and outfight anything that could not be avoided. Yira's voice was small. And this is the world that produced your species. This is the world that produced every species on Earth. Our wolves, which we domesticated into dogs, were persistent predators that could track prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. Our horses could run for hours without stopping. Our cattle, those docile things we use for meat and milk, their wild ancestors could kill lions. Even our house cats, the small fluffy things we keep as pets, are apex predators in their weight class with a hunting success rate that would make a Yverian pack proud. Earth does not do things halfway. Renlix made a gesture of understanding. This explains much. Very well. We should begin surgery. The damage is extensive but repairable. Yira, prepare the synthetic tissue regeneration matrix. Holst, I will need your expertise on impact trauma. Let us repair what the Deathworlder broke. The surgery took 4 hours. They reconstructed Vex Thor's jaw using a combination of synthetic bone grafting and cellular regeneration, a technique that would have seemed like magic to humans a few decades ago, but was routine for galactic medicine. The zygomatic arch required complete replacement, the synthetic structure carefully shaped to match his original bone structure. The soft tissue damage was extensive, but responded well to regeneration therapy. New cells growing in accelerated time to replace what had been destroyed. Throughout the procedure, Holst provided commentary that was equal parts educational and horrifying. He explained how human punching technique had evolved to maximize force transfer, how the rotation of the hips could generate power equivalent to a mechanical weapon, how trained fighters could throw combinations that delivered hundreds of impacts in rapid succession. He mentioned, almost casually, that boxing matches on Earth could last 12 rounds of 3 minutes each, with fighters absorbing dozens of head strikes and continuing to fight. By the end of surgery, Renlix and Yira had developed a healthy respect for human destructive capacity and an overwhelming gratitude that Marcus had shown restraint. Vex Thor would recover fully, though the psychological impact of being knocked unconscious with a single strike would probably linger longer than the physical injuries. The investigation into the cafeteria incident took 6 hours and involved reviewing security footage from 8 different angles. The conclusion was inescapable. Vex Thor had initiated physical contact. Marcus had warned him explicitly. And when attacked, The human had defended himself with a response that was proportional by human standards, even if it looked like attempted murder to everyone else. The disciplinary hearing was a formality. Marcus sat in front of a panel of 3 senior instructors and explained, very calmly and with admirable patience, that he had not wanted to fight and had attempted de-escalation multiple times before resorting to physical force. The instructors, who had reviewed the footage and the medical reports and the growing file of documentation about human capabilities, found themselves in the awkward position of punishing a cadet for defending himself too effectively. The compromise was mandatory attendance at cross-species combat training sessions, where Marcus would help develop protocols for humans sparring with other species without accidentally killing them. It was presented as punishment, but was really the Academy trying to figure out how to integrate Deathworlders into their curriculum without turning the medical bay into a full-time emergency room. Vex Thor spent 3 days in medical recovery, during which he had ample time to contemplate his life choices. When he was finally released, his face fully healed but his pride in critical condition, he discovered that his status at the Academy had fundamentally changed. He was no longer the apex predator of Kepler-7. That title now belonged to the 5'10" human who had put him in the hospital without breaking a sweat. The real humiliation came when Vex Thor returned to the cafeteria for the first time since the incident. He entered with his usual swagger, trying to reclaim some dignity, only to find Marcus sitting at the same table, eating the same terrible NutriPaste, looking exactly as relaxed and harmless as he had before sending a Krellian to the hospital with 1 punch. Marcus looked up, smiled, and waved. "Hey Vex. Welcome back, hand okay?" It took Vex Thor a moment to realize the human was making a joke. His hand was fine. His face had been the problem. The sheer audacity of it, the complete lack of fear or even acknowledgement that they had been in a fight, was somehow more insulting than the punch had been. "My face is healed, thank you." Vex Thor's voice was stiff, his pride wrestling with his survival instincts. "Good, good. Look, man, I'm sorry about that. I genuinely tried to pull the strike. I've been working with the combat instructors on calibrating my responses for different species. Turns out humans hit a lot harder than we think we do. It is a whole thing. You were holding back. It was not a question." "Yeah. If I had gone full power, the doc said you would have, well, let us just say it would have been much worse. I really did not want to hurt you. I just wanted you to stop." Vex Thor stood there, processing this information. The human had casually destroyed his face while pulling his punch. The human was apologizing not for hitting him, but for hitting him too hard. The human was sitting there eating terrible food and acting like hospitalizing a Krellian was equivalent to bumping into someone in the hallway. "I should not have attacked you," Vex Thor said finally, the words dragged out of him by some combination of survival instinct and newfound wisdom. "It was inappropriate and poorly considered. Hey, we all make mistakes. You made one, I corrected it emphatically. We both learned something. You learned humans are not soft-worlders. I learned I need to recalibrate my threat responses for species with different durability levels. Personal growth all around." Marcus gestured at the empty seat across from him. "Want to sit? I promise not to throw any food or punches." Cafeteria truce. Vex Thor, operating on instincts millions of years old that screamed never turn your back on an apex predator, sat down. The cafeteria watched with fascination as the top Krellian combat cadet and the human who had hospitalized him shared a meal like nothing had happened. Word spread through the Academy with the speed of hyperspace communication. The human was not to be challenged. The human was friendly, polite, and utterly devastating when provoked. The human represented a new category of cadet that the Academy's social hierarchy had no framework for processing. Above the Krellians? Beside them? In some orthogonal dimension where Earth physics applied instead of galactic norms. The combat instructors, meanwhile, were having a crisis. They had reviewed human martial arts databases, watched training footage, and consulted with Dr. Holst about human physical capabilities. The conclusion was unavoidable. Humans had been training for war since before they had invented writing. Every human culture had independently developed sophisticated combat systems, because on Earth, knowing how to fight was the difference between survival and extinction. Instructor Krelix, a Krellian weapons master with 40 years of teaching experience, watched footage of human boxing matches with the kind of horrified fascination usually reserved for natural disasters. They do this for entertainment. Not just entertainment, Dr. Holst, who had been invited to the training review session, clarified. For sport, for fitness, for self-defense, for military training, for cultural tradition. Combat is woven into human society at every level. We have children's programs that teach striking techniques. We have recreational leagues for teenagers. We have professional athletes who train 8 hours a day to be better at hitting other people. And this Marcus Chen, he is average for human fighters. Marcus has above-average training, but average physical capabilities for a healthy human male. There are humans considerably larger, stronger, and faster than him. There are humans who train in combat sports professionally. There are humans whose entire career is violence, and they are very, very good at it. The instructors looked at each other with the kind of silent communication that comes from years of working together. They were going to need new training protocols. Many new training protocols. 3 weeks after the incident, the academy had settled into a new equilibrium. Marcus continued to be friendly, helpful, and utterly terrifying to anyone who had seen the security footage. Vexthor had become, if not friends with the human, at least cordial. The Krellian had developed a newfound appreciation for de-escalation and conflict avoidance, which his instructors considered the best possible outcome of the incident. More humans were scheduled to arrive next semester, a full cohort of 30 cadets from various Earth military academies. The academy administration was preparing for this with the kind of frantic energy usually reserved for natural disasters. New training facilities were being built with reinforced walls. Medical staff were receiving crash courses in treating injuries inflicted by Deathworlders. Insurance premiums were being recalculated. In the cafeteria one evening, Vexthor found himself sitting with Marcus again, a development that would have seemed impossible a month ago. They were discussing training techniques, and Vexthor had made the mistake of asking about Earth martial arts. So your species has how many different combat systems? Marcus considered this while chewing synthetic protein. Globally, hundreds, maybe thousands if you count, and regional variations. Each culture developed their own approach based on their environment and available weapons. The Japanese had karate and judo and kendo, and about 20 others. The Brazilians took Japanese jiu-jitsu and made Brazilian jiu-jitsu. The Thai have Muay Thai, which involves hitting people with literally every part of your body. The Israelis developed Krav Maga, which is less a martial art and more a system for ending fights as quickly and brutally as possible. The Chinese have Kung Fu, which is actually an umbrella term for hundreds of different styles. Americans took a bit of everything and made mixed martial arts. The list goes on. And humans learn these systems for what purpose? Your world is civilized now, surely? Oh sure, Earth is mostly peaceful these days. We have not had a major war in decades.